Most people kill lavender by caring too much. They water it, feed it, and shelter it until it rots quietly at the roots while looking healthy above ground. Then they blame the plant. The truth is, lavender evolved in conditions most gardeners would consider neglect. Poor soil, full sun, no water for months, and wind that strips moisture from every surface. These 20 secrets are what the plant has always needed. Most of them cost nothing. All of them work. Number 20. Plant it in the worst soil you have. This is the one that breaks every instinct a gardener has developed. Lavender is native to the Mediterranean basin, specifically the rocky, alkaline, nutrient-poor hillsides of Provence, Spain, and the Greek islands. The soil in those locations is barely soil at all. It is broken stone with mineral dust. It drains within seconds of rain. It holds almost no organic matter. It is the kind of ground most gardeners would amend heavily before planting anything. Do not amend it for lavender. Do not add compost. Do not add manure. The moment you enrich the soil, you create conditions that drive excessive soft growth, lush, water-hungry stems that die in the first frost and rot at the base in the first wet spring. Rich soil is the fastest path to a dead lavender plant. If your soil is sandy, rocky, or gravelly, plant directly into it without preparation. If your soil is heavy clay or rich loam, amend it by removing the existing soil and replacing with a gritty mix of 50% coarse horticultural grit and 50% standard compost. The grit is not optional. Poor soil is not a problem for lavender. It is the prerequisite. And if poor soil is the foundation, the next secret is what sits underneath it. And getting this wrong kills more lavender than any disease or pest ever has. Number 19. Drainage is not important. It is everything. Lavender does not die from cold. It does not die from drought. It does not die from wind, poor soil, or occasional neglect. It dies from wet roots, almost exclusively. Waterlogged soil around lavender roots creates the anaerobic conditions where Phytophthora and Pythium root rot pathogens thrive. These organisms attack root tissue within days of sustained waterlogging, and by the time the plant shows symptoms above ground, gray foliage, soft stems at the base, wilting despite moist soil, the root system is already too compromised to recover. The practical implication is this: before you plant lavender anywhere, pour a bucket of water onto the soil and observe what happens within 30 minutes. If the water has not drained completely, that location will eventually kill lavender, regardless of how well you manage everything else. Either raise the planting area by mounding the soil 20 to 30 centimeters above the surrounding grade, or install drainage before planting. On slopes, lavender thrives naturally because gravity does the drainage work. Flat ground requires intervention. Containers require holes large enough to drain freely, and container-grown lavender should never sit in a saucer that collects water. Drainage keeps the roots alive. The next secret keeps the roots accessible to exactly the conditions they need most. Number 18. Never mulch with organic material around the base. Bark mulch around lavender is one of the most well-intentioned ways to kill it. Organic mulches retain moisture, which is precisely what lavender roots do not need. As bark, wood chip, or compost mulch sits against lavender stems and decomposes, it creates a humid microclimate at the base of the plant, where the soft wood of the lower stems is most vulnerable to fungal disease. It also keeps the soil surface cooler than lavender prefers, slowing the evaporation that helps protect roots after rain. The correct mulch for lavender is gravel or crushed stone. A layer of 5 to 8 centimeters of pea gravel or granite grit spread around the base of the plant does the opposite of organic mulch. It reflects heat upward onto the plant, improves drainage away from the stem base, prevents moisture from sitting against the wood, and creates the warm, dry, Mediterranean microclimate the plant actually evolved in. Gravel mulch is a permanent installation that improves with age. It never decomposes, never needs replacing, and continues protecting roots every winter season without any action from the gardener. Gravel around the base costs very little and changes the survival rate of lavender in cold, wet climates dramatically. The next secret changes the survival rate even more, and it is something most gardeners do only once in the plant's lifetime, if ever. Number 17. The cutting that determines whether it lives for 3 years or 30. Lavender without pruning becomes lavender that dies young. Left unpruned, Lavender stems become woody from the base upward over successive seasons. Once stems have fully woodified, the plant cannot regenerate from those sections. If cut back hard into old wood, nothing grows. The plant splits open at the center, develops dead section, and within 2 to 3 seasons begins to collapse entirely. The pruning window that prevents this is immediately after the first flush of flowering in summer. Cut back by 1/3 to 1/2 of the total plant height at this point, always cutting into green, flexible growth, and never into the brown woody base. This single annual cut keeps the base of the plant producing new flexible growth from which next year's flowering stems emerge. A lavender plant pruned correctly every year for 10 years looks better in year 10 than it did in year 3. An unpruned lavender looks worse every year from year 2 onward. 1 cut per year, same time every year, never into the wood. That is the entire pruning protocol. Pruning keeps the plant young. The next secret keeps it young and multiplies it for nothing across your entire garden. Number 16, propagate from cuttings and never buy a plant again. A single healthy lavender plant contains unlimited future plants, and taking cuttings is simpler than any propagation method most gardeners have attempted. In late summer, after flowering and after the main pruning cut, the trimmed material you have just removed contains every cutting you need. Select stems of 10 to 15 centimeters with a flexible green tip and a slightly more mature base. Strip the lower leaves from the bottom half of the cutting and push it directly into a pot of 50% perlite and 50% compost. No rooting hormone is needed. Lavender roots readily from cuttings without chemical assistance. Water once, cover loosely with a clear plastic bag to retain humidity, and place in a bright location out of direct midday sun. Roots develop within 4 to 6 weeks. By the following spring, each cutting is a plant ready for its permanent position. One mature lavender plant produces dozens of usable cuttings per pruning session. In 2 seasons, a single purchased plant becomes an entire hedge, a border, or the surplus stock for neighboring gardeners who have been killing lavender for years and cannot understand why. Cuttings are how lavender spreads across gardens that understand it. The next secret is how it survives the one season that eliminates lavender from gardens that do not. Number 15, what actually kills lavender in winter, and it is not the cold. Lavender is cold hardy, far beyond what most gardeners credit it with. English lavender, Lavandula angustifolia, tolerates temperatures below -20 degrees Celsius in dry conditions. That is colder than most of the regions where gardeners routinely lose it every winter. The cold is not the problem. The combination of cold and wet is. When waterlogged soil freezes around lavender roots, ice crystals form in the soil pore spaces and expand, physically rupturing root tissue on a cellular level. The plant does not freeze to death. Its roots are torn apart by ice in saturated soil. The distinction matters because the solution is drainage, not protection. Gardeners who wrap lavender in fleece through winter are solving the wrong problem. Fleece does nothing for root zone moisture. Drainage does everything. A lavender plant with well-drained roots in a gravel mulch survives the same winter that kills a wrapped plant in waterlogged soil without effort, without fleece, and without any special treatment. Winter protection energy is better spent improving drainage in autumn than wrapping plants in spring. The next secret takes this logic further, and it applies specifically to the varieties that most people choose by mistake. Number 14, the variety decision that determines everything before you plant. Not all lavender is created equal, and the most commonly sold varieties in garden centers are often the ones least suited to the conditions most gardeners have. French lavender, Lavandula stoichas, with its distinctive pineapple-shaped flowers and butterfly wing bracts, is the one most likely to be displayed prominently in spring. It is also the least cold hardy and the most demanding in terms of drainage. It looks spectacular in the pot it was grown in. It frequently dies in the first winter outside it. English lavender varieties, particularly Hidcote, Munstead, and Vera, are the foundation plants for lavender in cold and temperate climates. They tolerate frost, wind, and the occasional mist watering with the patience of plants that evolved for exactly those conditions. Hidcote produces the deepest purple flower spikes of any compact variety. Munstead is the fastest establishing and most tolerant of slightly heavier soil. Vera is the largest growing and the one historically cultivated for oil production across Provence. Choose English lavender varieties for reliability. Add French varieties only in containers that can be moved under cover in winter. Variety selection is a decision made once that affects every subsequent season. The next secret is a decision made every week during the growing season, and most gardeners make it incorrectly without realizing. Number 13, water it less than you think is humane. The most common lavender killer is a gardener who cares. Established lavender, meaning any plant that has been in the ground for more than one full growing season, requires supplemental watering only during extended drought of 4 weeks or more in summer. Outside of that condition, rainfall in most temperate climates provides more moisture than lavender needs. Watering on a schedule, regardless of conditions, consistently overhydrates lavender roots and creates the sustained moisture that root rot pathogens require. The practical watering protocol is this: water once after planting to settle the soil around the roots. Water during the first summer if rainfall is absent for more than 2 weeks. After the first winter, stop watering entirely except during genuine extended drought. Lavender in containers requires slightly more frequent watering than in-ground plants because containers dry out faster. But even container lavender should be allowed to dry completely between waterings. If the top 3 centimeters of the compost are still moist, do not water. If the container feels light when lifted, water thoroughly and allow to drain completely before returning to its position. Less water is almost always the correct intervention for lavender that looks unhealthy. The next secret is the intervention for lavender that looks healthy but is declining for a reason nobody sees coming. Number 12, stop feeding it. Fertilizer and lavender are not a combination. They are a conflict. Nitrogen, the primary driver of leafy growth in most garden plants, pushes lavender into producing exactly the soft, lush, water-hungry growth that makes it susceptible to frost damage, root rot, and structural collapse. A lavender plant fed with a balanced fertilizer every spring produces impressive green growth and disappointing flowers, then enters winter with stems too soft to survive the cold and a root zone too rich to drain efficiently. The soil lavender evolved and contains so little available nitrogen that any significant addition disrupts the plant's fundamental growth pattern. In its native habitat, lavender flowers prolifically because stress drives reproductive effort. A plant under nutritional pressure produces more flowers, not fewer, in an evolutionary drive to set seed before conditions deteriorate further. Deliberately keeping lavender plants in slightly nutrient-poor conditions replicates this stress and produces exactly the response you want: abundant flowers, compact growth, and sturdy stems that survive winter and look better every year. Feed lavender nothing. The hungrier it is, the better it blooms. The next secret is about what happens after the blooming, and it is a step most gardeners skip that costs them a second flowering entirely. Number 11, deadhead for a second flush that most gardeners never see. After the first flowering flush in early to midsummer, lavender is capable of a second flush in late summer and early autumn if the spent flower spikes are removed promptly after the first flowering ends. The second flush is rarely as prolific as the first, but it extends the flowering season by 6 to 8 weeks, produces a fresh set of fragrant stems for cutting and drying, and contributes to the overall health of the plant by preventing energy from being directed into seed production. A lavender plant allowed to set seed after its first flowering puts the resources that would have produced a second flush into seed development instead. Deadheading lavender is also the precursor to the light summer pruning described in secret number 17. The two actions are performed in sequence. Remove spent flower spikes first, then take the broader pruning cut into the green growth below them. Done together, they take less than 5 minutes per plant and deliver both the second flowering and the structural maintenance the plant needs in a single garden session. 2 flushes instead of 1, from 5 minutes of work. The next secret is what to do with everything harvested from both flushes. Number 10, harvest at the moment of maximum oil content. The fragrance of dried lavender depends almost entirely on when it was cut. Lavender oil content in flower buds peaks at the moment, just before the flowers open fully. When the buds are showing color, but the individual florets have not yet separated from the spike. Cut at this stage, the buds retain oil through the drying process and remain fragrant for months to years. Cut after full bloom, when the florets are fully open and beginning to shed, the oil content is already declining, and the dried product loses fragrance within weeks. The practical test is simple. Rub a bud between your fingers. If the oil releases immediately and the scent is intense, the moment has passed. If the scent releases with firm pressure but not at a touch, harvest now. This window lasts 4 to 7 days, depending on weather conditions. Warm, dry weather shortens it. Cool, cloudy conditions extend it. Cut in the morning after the dew has dried, but before midday, heat causes oil volatilization from the warm buds. Bundle in groups of 20 to 30 stems. Secure with an elastic band that will tighten as the stems dry and shrink, and hang upside down in a warm, dark, well-ventilated space for 3 to 4 weeks. The difference between lavender cut at peak and lavender cut late is the difference between a product that scents a room for 2 years and one that loses its fragrance before the season ends. Harvest timing is everything for fragrance. What comes next is what most gardeners have never considered about the relationship between lavender and the plants growing beside it. Number 9. The companion plants that make lavender thrive. Lavender does not thrive in isolation, the way most garden books present it. In its native Mediterranean habitat, lavender grows alongside a specific community of plants that share its requirements and whose presence creates conditions that support the whole group. Rosemary, thyme, oregano, and sage are the natural companions, all aromatic, all adapted to poor, dry, alkaline soil, all with root systems that leave the soil structure open and aerated rather than closing it down. Planting lavender alongside these companions creates a microclimate of warm, reflected heat between the plants, consistent airflow through the open structure of the group, and shared attraction for the beneficial insects that pollinate all of them. The aromatic volatile compounds from each plant contribute to a combined olfactory environment that disorients and deters the aphids and caterpillars that occasionally target lavender buds. What lavender does not tolerate as a companion is any plant requiring regular moisture, heavy feeding, or that produces dense shade. Hostas, ferns, astilbes, and other moisture-loving perennials planted near lavender create the wet root zone conditions that lavender cannot survive alongside. Companion plants are not decoration around lavender. They are the ecosystem it evolved within. The next secret concerns the visitors that ecosystem attracts, and why their presence is a measure of whether the planting is working correctly. Number 8. If bees are not on it, something is wrong. A healthy lavender plant in full flower is one of the most active pollinator sites in any garden. Honeybees, bumblebees, solitary bees, and hoverflies work flowering lavender continuously throughout the day during the main bloom period. In documented pollinator surveys, lavender ranks consistently among the top 5 plants by pollinator visit frequency per hour during its flowering season. If your lavender is in flower and not receiving frequent bee visits, the plant is signaling a problem. Lavender that has been fed with synthetic nitrogen produces less volatile oil and consequently less scent, which dramatically reduces its pollinator attraction. Lavender in partial shade produces fewer and less fragrant flowers than specimens in full sun. Lavender stressed by waterlogging produces flowers, but directs less resource into the oil glands that produce scent. Absent or rare, bee visits on a flowering lavender plant are a diagnostic indicator before any visible symptom appears. If the bees are not coming, review the sun exposure, check the drainage, and consider whether any fertilizer has been applied. The bees tell you what the plant can not say directly. The next secret concerns something the plant communicates differently, through its color, and what that color is actually revealing. Number 7. What the color of lavender foliage is actually telling you. Lavender foliage speaks clearly to gardeners who know how to listen. Silver gray foliage with a strong aromatic scent and compact growth indicates a plant in optimal conditions. Sufficient sun, poor soil, good drainage, and low moisture. This is the appearance of a plant working at full capacity, producing oils in abundance, and directing energy into the growth pattern it evolved for. Gray foliage turning yellow-green indicates excess nitrogen, almost always from an overly rich soil or an ill-advised fertilizer application. The plant is being pushed into leafy growth at the expense of oil production and flowering. Remove any organic mulch, stop any feeding, and top dress with horticultural grit to dilute the nutrient availability in the root zone. Dark green foliage that is soft to the touch indicates excess moisture and likely the early stages of root stress. Improve drainage immediately. A plant showing this symptom that is left in the same conditions typically dies within 1 to 2 growing seasons. Foliage that is pale, almost white, and appears bleached rather than silver indicates extreme drought stress in an established plant. Rare and easily corrected with a single thorough watering followed by a return to the usual neglect. Foliage color is a real-time report on the plant's condition. The next secret uses a different kind of reading to get ahead of problems before the foliage tells you anything at all. Number 6. The soil test that saves lavender before it shows distress. Lavender prefers a soil pH between 6.5 and 7.5, slightly acidic to mildly alkaline. In soil below 6, aluminium and manganese become soluble at concentrations that damage root function, even though no visible toxicity symptom appears until significant damage has already occurred. Most gardens and regions with high rainfall gradually acidify over time as rain leaches calcium and other alkaline minerals from the root zone. A garden that grew lavender successfully 10 years ago may have drifted to a soil pH that is now limiting the plant without any obvious cause being visible. A basic soil pH test from any garden center applied to the root zone of lavender that is performing below expectations often reveals the answer that no amount of drainage improvement or watering adjustment would have found. If soil pH has dropped below 6, a surface application of garden lime at the manufacturer's recommended rate, watered in gently, corrects the problem within 1 growing season. Test the soil before purchasing new plants for a failed location. The problem that killed the previous lavender is still there, and the solution is often a $5 bag of lime. Soil chemistry is the invisible variable. The next secret is about a visible one that most gardeners misread completely. Number 5. The leggy lavender rescue that works when nothing else does. A lavender plant that has become leggy, with long, bare, woody stems and sparse foliage concentrated only at the tips, is a plant that has been under-pruned for several consecutive seasons. Most gardening advice says it cannot be recovered. That advice is not entirely accurate. The partial recovery method works as follows. In early spring, before new growth begins, cut back the plant in stages over 2 seasons, rather than attempting a single hard cut. In the first spring, remove 1/3 of the oldest, woodiest stems entirely at the base, cutting back to within a few centimeters of the ground. Leave the remaining 2/3 to leaf out and flower normally. In the second spring, remove half of the remaining old stems. This staged removal stimulates the plant to produce new growth from the base of cut stems over 2 seasons, rather than demanding it produce all new growth at once, which it cannot do from fully woodified tissue. The result is a plant with an increasingly younger structure over 2 seasons, rather than a plant cut hard and killed by the intervention. It works on plants that appear beyond saving. Not always, but often enough to try before replacing. Recovery takes patience. The next secret requires no patience at all, produces instant results, and is the one that changes how every lavender garden looks within a single afternoon. Number 4. The planting distance that most gardeners get wrong every time. Lavender planted too close looks full and impressive in year 1 and becomes a crowded, poorly ventilated problem by year 3. Most compact English lavender varieties need a minimum spacing of 45 to 60 centimeters between plants to reach their natural form without crowding adjacent specimens. In that space, each plant develops its characteristic mounding shape. Airflow moves freely between plants, reducing humidity and fungal disease risk. And each specimen receives unobstructed sun from morning through evening. Lavender planted at 30 centimeters, as is common when gardeners follow the instinct to fill space quickly, produces plants that compete for light, grow tall and stretched rather than mounded and compact, and develop the poor air circulation that allows botrytis and other fungal diseases to establish in the interior of the group. The counterintuitive instruction is to plant lavender further apart than feels right. Then fill the gaps between young plants with annual herbs or low-growing companions that can be removed as the lavender expands. By year 3, the lavender will have filled the space correctly, and the companions are no longer needed. Correct spacing looks sparse initially and becomes perfect eventually. The next secret works on a different time scale. It addresses what happens to lavender over decades rather than seasons, and almost no gardening source discusses it. Number 3. Lavender lives longer than most gardeners allow it to. The oldest documented lavender plants in cultivation are over 150 years old. Most garden lavender is replaced within 5 to 10 years because gardeners allow it to become woody, leggy, and unproductive and conclude that the plant has reached the end of its life. It has not. It has reached the end of a maintenance cycle that was managed incorrectly from the beginning. Lavender plants in Provence, grown for oil production, are maintained on 30-year productive cycles through annual pruning and periodic coppicing. These are not specimen plants or garden curiosities. They are commercial crops, managed for yield and longevity simultaneously. The implication for garden lavender is significant. A lavender plant you purchased this year, managed correctly from the beginning, pruned annually, grown in poor soil with excellent drainage, and propagated to replace any specimen that does eventually decline, is a permanent feature of your garden in the same way a tree or a hedge is a permanent feature. Lavender is not a short-lived plant. It is a long-lived plant, killed by short-term management decisions. The next secret is the management decision that affects longevity more than any other, and it is one that experienced lavender growers apply without thinking because it has become instinct. Number 2, the airflow secret that Mediterranean gardeners have always known. In Provence, lavender fields are planted on south-facing slopes, not only for sun exposure, but for the consistent airflow that slope positions provide. Moving air evaporates surface moisture from foliage and soil continuously, reduces the ambient humidity around the plant that fungal diseases require, and keeps foliage dry between rain events in a way that still sheltered planting positions never achieve. The worst positions for lavender in most gardens are corners where two walls meet, the sheltered leeward side of hedges, and the centers of densely planted beds where surrounding plants block airflow. These positions trap humid air around the lavender, keep foliage wet after rain, and create the conditions that botrytis gray mold exploits most aggressively. The best positions are open, elevated, and exposed. The top of a raised bed, the crest of a slope, a south-facing wall base where air circulates freely, or the edge of a paving area where reflected heat and airflow combine. These positions feel exposed and slightly harsh. They are exactly what lavender needs. If you cannot move an established plant to a better position, remove surrounding plants that are blocking airflow around it. A lavender plant with better airflow in the same location survives conditions that would have killed it, surrounded by denser neighbors. Airflow is the invisible requirement that rewrites the survival probability of every lavender plant it reaches. And the final secret on this list is the one that holds every other secret together. Number 1, treat it like a wild plant, not a garden plant. This is the secret that underpins every other entry on this list. Every failure mode of lavender in cultivation traces back to the same source. A gardener treating a wild, self-sufficient plant as though it were a domesticated crop requiring management, nutrition, protection, and intervention. Lavender on a Mediterranean hillside receives no watering, no feeding, no pruning, no mulching, no winter protection, and no pest treatment. It grows in stone and mineral dust. It survives summer temperatures that bake the ground to dust and winter conditions that would kill most tender herbs. It lives for decades without human assistance because it evolved to do exactly that. Every act of care applied to lavender beyond the minimum. More water, richer soil, organic mulch, additional feeding, excessive pruning, winter wrapping, moves it further from the conditions it evolved for and closer to the conditions that kill it. The gardener who grows the best lavender is the one who intervenes the least, who plants in the worst soil available, who forgets to water for weeks at a time and comes back to find it thriving, who mows the surrounding area and ignores the lavender itself for months and returns to find it fuller and more fragrant than before. Lavender does not need you to take care of it. It needs you to stop. The gardeners who understand this have lavender that lives for 30 years, multiplies freely across their garden, flowers every summer without fail, and improves every season without additional investment. The plant was never the problem. If this changed how you think about lavender, or if you've been killing it for years and just found out why, leave it in the comments. We want to know which secret hit hardest. Want to see the 20 ground cover plants that replace your lawn entirely and never need mowing? Click on the left. And if you do not want to miss more guides like this one, hit that subscribe button now.